Large language models go through three completely different kinds of training before it even shows up behind an API or any application. And this is a very important concept you need to learn if you're getting into AI engineering. So in this video, I'm breaking down how modern LLMs are actually trained end to end from an applied engineering seat and not the research one, so don't worry about it. And the good news is the whole thing collapses into three stages. So it's pre-training, post-training, and alignment. That's pretty much the entire map. Now, every acronym that you've ever tripped over reading it on LinkedIn, things like SFT, LoRa, QLoRa, DPO, GRPO, RLVR, RFT, slots into one of these three boxes. So by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which box each one lives in, what is it actually for, and when you as a builder should reach for it versus leave it alone. And the last part is the whole point. See, almost every failed fine-tuning project that I've watched die the same way. Someone reached for a training when the problem lived in a completely different stage. They tried to teach a model new facts when all they needed was retrieval. They fine-tuned to patch a prompt that could just have been rewritten. So getting a sense of this landscape will help you to stop making that mistake. And if you're new here, hi there, I'm Aishwarya Srinivasan. I've spent over a decade in machine learning and AI. I've been a data scientist at companies like Microsoft, Google, and IBM, and I've also led developer relations at one of the top AI startups called Fireworks AI. So a lot of this pipeline is not just theory for me. I've actually built it and also worked with customers to build it. Okay, so let's get started. Let's start at the bottom with pre-training because everything else is built on top of it. So pre-training is where a model reads a huge chunk of the internet and learns how language, code, and reasoning patterns actually work. And it learns all of it from one deceptively simple objective: predict the next token. That's it. The model sees a stretch of text, guesses what comes next, checks how wrong it was, and adjusts. Now, do that across trillions of tokens and grammar, facts, coding patterns, and the relationship between a question and its answer, all followed of the same game. Nobody is really handwriting any of it. Now, here's the part that trips up engineers who are new to this. What comes out of pre training is not ChatGPT, it is not Claude, it is a base model. And a base model does not chat. It just completes text. So if you type a question into a raw base model, it might just continue with more questions. Because nobody has taught it that a question is supposed to be followed by an answer. So think of it as somebody who's read every book in the library, absorbed all the knowledge about how language works, but has never once been in a conversation. So it has enormous knowledge, but zero instinct on how to behave. So what do you actually need to know about this stage as an engineer? Three things. First, pre-training is almost never your job. This is a multi-million or a billion-dollar thing with thousands of GPU and running across multiple months. Outside of a handful of frontier labs, basically nobody is pre-training from scratch. What you do instead is start from an open weight checkpoint like Llama, Qwen, Mistral, or DeepSeek. Or you hit a closed model through an API. So the practical skill here is not training, it is choosing the right model. It is knowing the difference between a base checkpoint and an instruct or chat checkpoint on Hugging Face, and knowing the license you're actually allowed to ship on. It matters more than knowing the training math. Second, the data mixture is the model. The reason one model codes brilliantly and falls apart on legal reasoning usually traces straight back to what went into pre-training and in what proportions. More code in the mix, better at code. This is why teams pick something like Qwen for coding and math heavy work and a different base elsewhere. The base that you choose already has a personality baked in before you even touch it. Third, watch the architecture. A lot of the strongest open models now, like DeepSeek and large Qwen models, are mixture of experts. If you don't understand mixture of experts, I'm going to link a resource below, so definitely check it out. Now, what mixtures of experts means is that the model has a huge total number of parameters, but it only activates a slice of it per token. So at any given point in time, the model is not really using all of its parameters. Basically, it's optimized. For you, that shows up as a gap between total parameters and active parameters, and it directly affects your memory footprint and your serving cost. Now, if you're picking a model to actually deploy, that distinction is not trivial, it is actually your infrastructure bill. So pre-training hands you raw capability in a package that cannot hold a conversation yet. Turning that raw thing into something useful is the entire job of the next few stages. And that's where an AI engineer will actually spend most of their time on. Okay, now let's get into stage number 2, which is post-training. Post-training is where nearly all applied work in the industry is living right now. So we are going to spend the most time here. This is where a raw base model becomes something that actually follows instruction, holds a tone, or solves a specific task. There are a few tools in this stage that I would recommend, so let me take them in the order that you would actually reach for them. The first one is SFT, or supervised fine tuning. If you've done any classical ML, this is the most familiar part that you're going to see. You show the model inputs and correct outputs, except instead of features and labels, it is instruction and response pairs. So things like summarize this contract paired with a genuinely good summary, and thousands of times over and over again. Now, this is the step that turns a base model into an instruct model. It teaches format, instruction following, tone, and the structure for your task. And one thing most people get backwards here is with SFT, quality beats quantity. And it's not even close. A few thousand clean, carefully written examples will almost always beat 100,000 scraped, noisy ones. Your data curation is the work. The training run is the easy part. Now, the naive way to do SFT is to update every weight in the model. That's called full fine tuning, and for most teams, it's an overkill. It's memory hungry, it's expensive, and if you do it carelessly, the model forgets the thing it learned in pre training. So the standard move is parameter efficient fine tuning, and the two names that you would have heard here is LoRa and QLoRa. LoRa is basically low rank adaptation, and here is how it works. You freeze the entire base model and train a tiny set of add-on adapter weights instead. So picture a factory tuned engine where instead of rebuilding the entire thing, you're just bolting on a small module that nudges how this drives. You're basically just touching the fraction of a percentage of the parameters, which makes the run cheap, fast, and easy to swap in and out. QLoRa goes one step further and compresses the frozen base weight into a 4-bit precision first. So the whole thing fits on a single GPU before you even add the adapters. That one trick is actually the reason fine-tuning stopped being a frontier lab luxury. And here's the current best practice update that you need to know. Because this is exactly the kind of thing that separates somebody who's reading a 2022 tutorial from somebody who's actually building it today. So there was a long held belief that LoRa is actually a compromise, that it is always going to be trailing behind a full fine tuning. Late last year, Thinking Machines Lab, the team with Meera Murati and John Schumann behind it, published a research called LoRa Without Regret that basically retired that belief for the common case. Their finding is that in normal post-training regime, LoRa matches full fine-tuning while using 2/3 of the compute as long as you configure it right. And they were specific about what right means. Apply LoRa to all the linear layers, not just the attention layer like the old tutorial told you. Because attention only underperforms even if you crank the rank. And the other thing is use a learning rate roughly 10 times higher than what you would use for a full fine tuning. Those two changes are the difference between LoRa feeling like a hack and LoRa being a dependable default. So if you want to take one concrete thing from this section, this is that. All linear layers and 10x learning rate. Now, there's a bonus that falls out of LoRa being so small. Because adapters are tiny, you can actually host hundreds of them on the same base model and swap them per request. That's almost certainly how providers serve thousands of customer fine-tuned models with basically no added latency. Different customers having one shared base and cheap little adapters on the top. Okay, so SFT basically teaches the model to copy a good answer. But a lot of the time, there's no single right answer, and one response is just better than the other. Now, that's the next thing that we're going to talk about. When the quality is subjective, so things like more helpful, more concise, more on brand, there's no answer key that the model can imitate. So instead of showing the model one correct output, you show it pairs. Same prompt, here's the preferred response, here's the rejected one. Learn to lean towards the good and away from the bad. The clean, modern way to do this is called DPO, or Direct Preference Optimization. Now, the heavier version that you would have also heard about is RLHF, or Reinforcement Learning with Human Feedback, which trained a separate reward model and then optimized against it with reinforcement learning. DPO gets you most of the way without standing up the whole reward model machinery, which is why most teams reach for it first. So if SFT is an intern copying the master, DPO is training your palate to pick the better of the two wines side by side. Now, for the part that's genuinely reshaping the field right now. Some tasks aren't a matter of taste at all. They're objectively right or wrong. A math answer checks out or it doesn't. Code passes the unit test or it doesn't. JSON matches the schema or it doesn't. Now, when the outcome is verifiable, you don't need a human grader every attempt. You hand the output to an automatic checker. Now, that is reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards, or RLVR. The model gets a reward signal, and over many rounds, it learns the behavior that leads to the answer that actually passes. This is the machinery behind the reasoning model wave, and DeepSeek R1 is what made it click for the whole industry. Two more names live right here. One is GRPO, which is Group Relative Policy Optimization. The intuition is friendlier than the name. Trust me on it. So instead of scoring one answer against some learned value model, you sample the whole group of answers to the same prompt and grade them against each other, like grading on a curve. It's cheaper because you drop the separate value model. Now, the second one is RFT, or reinforcement fine tuning. It is basically the productized version of all of this. You define the task, you define the grader, and then you train against that signal without wiring up the RL yourself. Now, one more tool that startups lean on hard and something that people skip in these explainers is distillation. So, what you do is you take a big, expensive, capable model and use its output to train a small, cheap one to behave like the master. That's how a lot of teams ship a small model that punches way above its size class, which is often the only way the economics work in production. Thinking Machines Lab has good recent writing on policy distillation if you want to go deep on that. I'll also add that in the description below. So, how does this actually get built and what are teams really using for it? In open source, the Hugging Face stack is still the center of gravity. Transformers to run the models, PEFT for LoRa, and TRL for the post-training workflows. For SFT, DPO, and GRPO, teams are using Axolotl and Unsloth, making LoRa and QLoRa run a lot more accessibly on a modest hardware. Now, on the managed side, Fireworks, where I used to work before, does hosted SFT, DPO, and RFT. OpenAI also exposes reinforcement fine-tuning for its reasoning models. That is also something that you can check out. And Thinking Machine Labs Tinker is worth calling out because it takes a different shape from the rest. Instead of hiding the training loop from you, Tinker gives you a low-level control over your algorithm and data with a handful of Python primitives. And it handles the ugly distributed GPU part, the scheduling, the allocation, and the recovery when a node crashes. You can fine-tune open models from small ones all the way up to 235 billion parameter mixture of experts by changing basically one string in your code. It runs LoRa under the hood, which is exactly why LoRa without regret matters to them. That efficiency is the bet the whole product is built on. Now, carefully listen to this. Here is the decision that matters more than any of these tools, and it's a thing that I want you to walk away repeating to yourself. Fine tuning is a behavior tool, not a knowledge tool. If the model does not know your internal documents, that is not a training problem, it is a retrieval problem. So at that point in time, you reach for RAG. If it's not returning the right shape, try structured outputs before you train anything. If your prompt is vague, fix the prompt. The order you should reach for things is this. First, prompt, then get into context engineering and RAG, then get into fine tuning. And you build your evals before any of them so you can actually tell whether it's improved or not. Reach for fine tuning when you need a behavior reproduced consistently and prompting cannot get you there. Or when you're distilling a big model's behavior into a cheap small one to hit a latency or a cost target. That is pretty much it. Internalize just that order and you will skip most of the expensive mistakes that AI engineers make in this space. Now, that's almost end of section 2. That covers turning raw capability into a model that behaves the way you want. But behaves the way you want hides a genuinely hard problem. And it's the stage that bites hardest in production. And that is alignment. Alignment is getting the model to do what you actually intended, not just what you literally typed. It's the genie problem. You get exactly what you asked for, and it's a disaster because the words and the intent weren't the same thing. First, where does alignment even come from in the pipeline? A lot of it is post training that we just covered, pointed at a specific goal. So the preference optimization, the safety fine-tuning, the refusal behavior, the system prompt the model was just shaped around. Those are alignment techniques. So alignment isn't really a separate box bolted onto the end. It is a lens on how you steer the model's behavior and values. Here is why you cannot treat this as somebody else's problem. As an engineer, alignment failures don't just show as abstract philosophy. They show up as the model being sycophantic and agreeing with a wrong premise, as over-refusing and blocking a legitimate request, as getting jailbroken past your guardrails, as handing you a confident, well-formed answer that is just wrong. Every one of them is an alignment gap that you have to design around. And it gets far more serious the moment you move from a chatbot to an agent. A chatbot that's misaligned just says something wrong. An agent that is misaligned does something wrong because it's calling tools, it is writing code, it is going to be spending money and triggering real workflows. The failure mode isn't just a bad sentence anymore, it is actually a bad action. You give an agent broad write permissions, let a prompt injection slip through, and now you have real damage, not just an awkward reply. So, what do you actually do about it in practice? The core principle is that you align the system, not just the model. The model is just one component and you never trust it alone in production. Concretely, that means a few things. First, build your evals first so you're measuring the behavior instead of just going with vibe evals. Then put guardrails on the input and outputs, filtering and validation around the model. Keep a human in the loop for high stakes or irreversible actions. And this is a big one for agents. Scope your tool permissions to least privilege. An agent should have the narrowest possible access to do its job and nothing more, with approval gates on anything that writes, sends, or spends. Then wrap the whole thing in observability so you can actually trace what the model did and why when something goes sideways. This is the layer most teams underinvest in. And this is the layer that decides whether your agent is actually running safe or not. So if you take one thing from this video, let it be the question that you ask yourself before you ever touch training at all. Which of these three stages does my problem actually live in? Because the answer will actually tell you the fix. Missing knowledge is retrieval problem, not a pre-training one. Wrong behavior or tone is a post-training problem, usually SFT or preferences. And a model that does what you said but not what you meant is an alignment problem that you solve at the system level and not by training harder. Now, if this video excited you to build your own AI systems, that is exactly why my co-founder Arvind and I built the Gen Academy. It's an AI upskilling platform and our mission is to train people to get into the top 0.1% of AI professionals in the world. It is built for both technical builders like software engineers and AI engineers, as well as non-technical folks like product managers, product marketing managers, and GTMs. Our flagship program is a 6-week certification called Mastering Agentic AI Certification, and these are live cohort sessions, not recorded lectures. Every week, we're going to be teaching you in live classes and actually having you build projects. For the projects, we have two tracks. One is code heavy one where you'll be using Python with LangChain, LangGraph and Llama Index. And for low code, no code one, you'll be building on tools like N8N. But both of the tracks are going to be learning the same concepts in the same sessions. What I'm really excited about is that we've also partnered with companies like NVIDIA, OpenAI, Replit, Fireworks AI, Pinecone, 11 Labs and so many more. And with this partnership, we are able to get you credits in order to use these production level tools. And we are also bringing in AI experts from their teams to come and do guest lectures. One genuine tip here, this course is actually covered by most companies' learning and development budget. So if you're interested in the course, definitely talk to your manager about it. There's also a special discount that I have for my YouTube audience, so check out that in the description below as well. So that's it. If you found this video useful, please do subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon because I break down AI engineering and agentic systems like this every single week. If you have any questions, you know what to do, just comment below and I'll look at it.